Boom! Hey everybody, Jake Perez here, broadcasting live with Onward, my weekly show dedicated to helping ordinary people live extraordinary lives. You can catch me right here live every Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Central Time, as I speak with some of the world's most interesting people about a variety of topics, all dedicated to helping you change your life forever. Tonight, of course, is a special Wednesday night episode of Onward. My guest tonight on this special show is both the founder of Hemp Therapeutics and the co-founder of Bearded Brothers Energy Bars. He has a long and successful history as a health-centered entrepreneur. Additionally, he is also a devoted family man, ultra marathon runner, outdoor enthusiast, all the while practicing an earth-friendly minimalistic lifestyle. Caleb Simpson, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, happy to be here.
All right. So, as advertised, you're hanging out outside in nature. You're kind of like the outdoor enthusiast, nature lover guy. And I guess I first ran into you some years ago. Maybe the first I ever heard your name was either in the ultra community or with your Bearded Brothers product. And I know we're mostly on here to talk a little bit about your new venture that you started a couple of years ago, which is Hemp Therapeutics, which is a company based around CBD products. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
All right. So before we get into all of that, I think it would kind of help our listeners, help our viewers a little bit understand a little bit more about, I'd love to just kind of talk a little bit more about who you are. And, a lot of people are talking CBD these days. A lot of people are selling the oil and things like that. But I think it's very interesting, the background that you have and kind of how you got to this point, how you got to founding your company 2 years ago, Hemp Daddy. I guess we can pick up the story going back wherever you want, but I guess it starts somewhere around 10 years ago or so. And tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are.
Yeah, I'd say probably more like 12 years ago because we ran.
Okay.
No, 10's pretty accurate, actually.
Okay.
So that was about the time we started the Bearded Brothers brand. And that actually kind of stemmed from my journey into health. So prior to that, I was pretty unhealthy, had a horrible diet. And I remember the time I was visiting my now wife in Austin and met who would be my future brother-in-law, and they at the time were like raw vegan. And
Okay.
so that weekend I visited them, that's all I got to eat because that's all they were feeding me. And so, I hated it first, but by the end of the week, I said, some of this stuff is actually pretty good. So I kind of went home and did some research and realized, man, I'm really unhealthy, but I think I need to make some changes. And so, I went just headlong into it. Like just overnight, I went vegetarian and was eating mostly raw vegan diet and I did that for about 2 years.
Ooh.
Then transitioned to vegetarian, and I've been some form of vegan or vegetarian off and on throughout that time. And that's kind of what led me to start Bearded Brothers. I was making my own organic raw vegan energy bars, and at the time before I got married, I was rock climbing like every other weekend. And all my climbing buddies were like, man, these bars are really good. I would actually pay for these. And so that kind of planted a seed, but it still wasn't for maybe a year or two after that when I actually pursued it. And that all kind of came to fruition when I moved to Austin. And originally I thought, oh, I'll just start this energy bar thing on the side. I'll get some freelance work, but the freelance work never came. So, just had to talk with my, at the time she was just fiance. I was like, hey, what if I start this business? It's like, we'd have to live on just your income. And she worked for a nonprofit organization too. So we weren't making money at all.
Right.
And so, but she was, very supportive of the business idea. And so, I partnered with my, brother-in-law because he had experience in the health and supplement industry. So I was like, man, he'd be great to go in business with. And so that's kind of how Bearded Brothers launched. And at the time, there's still pretty much no other certified organic, plant-based bar that's like just simple nuts and fruits. And I think Laura Bar is like the most comparable one, but they're not organic. And that's one of the things that's unique about Bearded Brothers and we also introduced all these different superfoods and chia seeds into the bar, which nobody else, still pretty much nobody does. So, so it was my journey in health that kind of led me into starting Bearded Brothers. And eventually, onto Hemp Daddies, and that kind of all, it all ties in nicely too with this, the health aspect and passion for, organic as well.
Sure. So it just started. You said, you were kind of unhealthy. You're, I guess living that typical American diet, right? And
Yep.
um, and you didn't tiptoe into the water. You just kind of jumped in head first. You said not only vegan, not only vegetarian, but you went raw vegan, right?
Yep.
That's pretty hardcore, man.
Yeah.
Have you seen? I mean, I guess I don't know how long ago it was, but have you seen the documentary Forks Over Knives?
Yep. I've seen that. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, so I mean that was kind of a big documentary that was out a while back, and I haven't been vegan nearly as much as you have, but it's something I've flirted with, and it's something that I know a ton of people really advocate. I mean, I think of people like Scott Jurek, right? I mean, he's a famous ultra guy who wrote a book called Eat and Run, and I guess he won Western States 7 times or so. Living nothing but plants, right?
Yep. Plant-based diet. Yep.
And so
Yep.
I mean, going back to that, you said you're unhealthy. Your diet was probably a pretty typical American diet. Were you exercising? Were you running back then, or when did your ultra journey start?
I was never a big exerciser. I would do it off and on. Occasionally I would run. Occasionally I worked for the city of Denton at the time, so I had a gym membership there, and so I would go to the gym on occasion, but I was never that serious.
Mm-hmm.
And every other night I'd be swinging by fast food, eating fast food for lunch almost every day. And so I ate a lot of junk, and I was pretty heavy back then. And so, and and I think I can't really exact timing, but I mean, getting into rock climbing, I think
Mm-hmm.
was kind of one of the healthy things I started doing. So getting into
Mm-hmm.
rock climbing, and that also kind of spurred on, some more healthy lifestyle changes, getting into running a little bit to help my cardio for going to the mountains and backpacking and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So any running and stuff I did was motivated by wanting to be in the mountains, which wasn't a
Gotcha.
bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
So when
so,
you say rock climbing, you're talking about outside
mhm.
in a gym? Because there are a lot of rock gyms these days that have gotten popular in the last 10 years. But you're doing all this outside?
Yeah, mostly outside. I mean, during the week, obviously I would just go to the climbing gyms, but on the
Mm-hmm.
weekends, I would get out to the crags whenever I could. And I mean, my foray into climbing just continued to grow and grow and grow. And
Mm-hmm.
I've done so much in that realm. From started with just top rope climbing, got into the sport climbing where you're clipping the bolts into the rocks as you climb up. Then got into trad
Mm-hmm.
climbing, is you're placing your own gear, and started doing a little bit of alpine stuff where I'd have to hike to the base of a climb with a backpack full of gear, and
Mm-hmm.
so, but yeah, and that's stuff I'm still interested in. Our kids are finally to the age we can start exploring that again. And
Mm-hmm.
so, I mean, since COVID, actually, we've been to the outdoor climbing. We've been a few times since then. Once Reimer's Ranch here close to Austin opened back up,
Mm-hmm.
we kind of been going out there with the kids because everybody can social distance out there pretty easily.
Sure. So you said this kind of started. You're in Denton, right? Up around Dallas.
Hmm.
Is that correct?
Yep.
Is that
Yep.
where you're from?
Yep, that's correct. Yep, and I grew up in Denton, went to school in Denton, University of North Texas, and and stayed there. So I led there for 31 years before moving to Austin.
Gotcha. Okay. And so kind of climbing and just getting interested in the outdoor, hiking, climbing, that kind of thing's sort of where, what got you on your health journey, right?
Yep.
You said you were heavy. How much weight did you lose doing all that stuff?
So so I was 220 pounds at my heaviest.
Mhm.
Um, then I'm 5'11", and so I dropped when I started. Well, first I started dieting, just watching calories. When I was still at City of Denton and started climbing, so I dropped down to about 180. 180 when I did that, and when I went raw vegan, I dropped another 10 pounds,
Hmm.
and I've stayed at that 170. But I'm kind of, for my height and weight, I'm kind of on the higher end of my BMI. And so
Mhm.
I've always been kind of skinny fat. I've carried all this extra weight in my belly. And
Mhm.
so, in like every year for like the past few years, I'm like, oh, this is going to be a year I finally get rid of that. I'm going to finally get rid of that.
Right.
And
Right.
so, in this year has finally been the year where it actually has been happening for me.
Huh.
Um, and it has took being like, I don't know if you've heard of Dr. Greger, but he's a plant-based advocate. he's got these huge books. He's got one called How Not to Die and a new one called How Not to Diet. And the one called How Not to Diet is what really kind of spurred me on into this new trajectory with my diet. And it's just more than watching calories. That's kind of put me back onto the track of, eating the vegan diet. And it really did come down to watching calories, because over the years, I just flirted with trying to lose that weight. And I'd be like, well, I'm running all the time. But I would always eat back all those calories I burned during my run. So it was like, nothing was happening because I was eating all the calories back. And I've recently learned that's not good for several reasons. A lot of the times our apps overestimate the amount of calories we burn during exercises.
Right.
And we probably underestimate the amount of calories we actually consume. So if you're trying to lose weight, like, these fitness apps are horrible in terms of like, you should never input your exercise in. Like, I quit doing that. So I kind of look at the several different calculators to figure out, okay, how much do I want to lose? And based on that, that's what I consume. Like, even if I run for that day, I listen to my body at the same time. If I feel like I need a little bit of extra, I'll consume another 100 or 200 calories. But yeah, and so it's like, it all comes down to this, and it really all comes down to being disciplined, because it's not enjoyable, it's painful. Like, especially with the amount of restriction I've been doing lately, it's been like, you're hungry a lot. But I mean, that's part of the journey.
Sure. So it really does come down to calories at the end of the day. I had a couple weeks back, I had Jesse Garcia on. He's a health and fitness trainer, and he's his philosophy is a little bit different than yours. I mean, you're into the vegan lifestyle, and which is a little bit more of a lifestyle than it is just a diet, right? So his approach is a little bit different, but the common ground that y'all have is that it's all really comes back to the calories. And I think that's one thing that a lot of people do, or a mistake that people make, is they think that they're running, you're putting in miles, you're logging miles, so you think maybe the calories don't matter as much. But hey, there's one thing I've learned for sure over the years, is that you just can't outrun food. I mean, if you're not eating, if you're overeating calories, or you think, well, I ran 5 miles so I can eat what I want, it just doesn't work like that. So all in all, you lost basically 50 pounds essentially, right? From like and it was mostly through the raw vegan diet, is that right?
Yeah, mostly. Yeah, it was mostly, all that, except for like the initial, I can't remember the initial pounds I lost. I didn't give a rip about diet at that point. I was just watching the calories, and saw that initial weight drop off. Then, like, over the years, various stages, more and more has come off. And now I feel like I'm at the perfect weight right now. Now it's just kind of like, managing, losing a little bit of excess, fat that's still in the midsection. I think a lot of that is, I'm kind of the point now where I think exercise is going to be a big factor into, kind of, getting to where I truly want to be. But in terms of actual weight now, I think I'm in like the perfect weight for my height and everything.
Gotcha. So, you kind of started running and whatnot, focusing on those things, like you said, to get in better shape, right? Really, it wasn't as much about running, but it was more about getting in shape so that you could climb and be more, successful when you're out there doing activities you enjoyed. But you pretty much fell in love with running, I think, from there. Is that right?
Yeah, I really did. And so what spurred that on? So Long's Peak in Colorado as a 14er was one of my goals. And so Buddy and we climbed one of the technical routes. So we're using a rope descent up kind of, I think it's the south face. I can't remember. It's not the big, giant, steep one that you see in pictures. It's one of the other faces, but it was still a technical climb. And it was going to be this big 6-mile hike up to the boulder field, heavy packs loaded with gear. And there was another backpacking portion of that trip as well we did. And so I was like, I got to get in shape, because the last time I'd gone up there, my friend, like, he just ran circles around me, and he was younger than I was, but he was inexperienced in the mountains. I was like, this dude should not be running circles around me. And so, like, that was the motivation to start running. And during that process, I eventually worked up to where I ran 6 miles. At first, I started out, I would be running 3 miles. I would just run loops around my house. And I was talking to a guy at church one day. He's like, well, how far are you running? He's like, oh, 3 miles. I was like, I just can't pull myself to run more. He's like, well, where do you run? I was like, I would just do these loops around the house. He's like, well, just run away from your house. He's like, so I was like, so I tried that. I just went on this run one day. That's back before we had these GPS tracking apps, so I had
Right.
no idea how far I was going. So I just ran. Like I live kind of close to North Texas campus. I ran in from
Hmm.
one end of the campus to the other and back to the house. And then I got on what was called like Google Pedometer at the time and
Hmm.
tracked my route. I was like, holy crap, I just ran 6 miles. And and I remember posting on Facebook. Then I had several other friends who were runners. Like, well, why don't you go run a half marathon now? I was like, huh. And so I was like, well, I'm halfway there. And so like I did the research and like what it took. I was like, well, I'm already halfway there, basically, really more than that because your training runs don't go over 10 miles for a half marathon. So I was like, hey, I can
Hmm.
do this. And
Sure.
so that just spurred my love for running. And ever since then, it's grown and grown. And I got into the ultra marathoning stuff once I was working in Bearded Brothers because there's this one guy named Gordon Montgomery who would come into my kitchen and just chit chat with me as we were making bars. He was
Hmm.
like, hey, you should talk to this guy, Joe Mercedes. He owns Tejas Trails. It's a trail running company.
Hmm.
So I was like, oh, that'd be a cool thing to get into and sponsor the races. And so I started sponsoring his races. And he's like, well, hey, if you want to run any of my races, just let me know. I'll even throw in some free training. I was like, well, heck yeah. And so I looked at his races and I picked his hardest race that he puts on called the Cactus Rose. It's this 50-mile race out in Bandera. It's just up and down these just steep rocky hills.
Hmm.
And so that was my first ultra marathon. And ever since then, I've been doing them ever since. It's been something I've just really loved and enjoyed. And as a rock climber, I think that's what really drew me to it because running was easier to do once we started having a family and kids because I could easily go out and run for a few hours in the morning and still be back home for the rest of the day
Hmm.
versus if I'm going to go climbing, I'm going to be gone for at least an entire day. So
Hmm.
it was just a more conducive sport to be involved in. I still got to get outdoors and be in nature, and so that's what kind of really spurred on the trail running for me.
Sure. So, what I find interesting, you said you did end up doing the half marathon. Is that correct?
Hmm.
Early
Yep,
on. So you did
yep,
that, and you told me before we got on live, you just skipped right over the marathon and just went straight to the 50, huh?
yep. I did. Yep, I'd never done a marathon before. It's like, well, I'm going to run that distance in my training. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, so yeah, just jumped straight from half marathons into running on trails and doing one of the hardest 50 milers in Texas.
Well, my story is a little bit different. I did a few marathons but years ago, and it took me, I guess, 20 years. And I was telling you, I've signed up for a 50, the Rocky Raccoon 50. So I'm
Rocky.
going to do that
Yep.
in February. So I'm kind of fascinated to find out a little bit more about what it's like to go way beyond 26 miles. I mean,
Hmm.
tell me a little bit. I mean, what was that? What was it like? I mean, how many miles did you train up to? What was your furthest training run you did before you did that
So
50?
yeah, so I think Joe, the coach I had at the time, I think he had 32 miles on my schedule, but I think I maxed at 30.
Okay.
I still kind of vaguely remember the day he had me at 32 miles. It was in the middle of summer, and I got to the 30-mile mark, and I was just spent and tired and hot. I was like, I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
30 miles is close enough. And so,
Yeah.
yeah,
So this was
and
what time of year was this race? The 50.
so that's in October.
Okay.
So if you think if you're running an October race,
Mm-hmm.
most of your training is in the dead heat of summer.
Sure.
It's like one of the worst possible races to train for,
Mm-hmm.
because it is, you know, because it's all your trainings during the summer. It's like I strongly prefer now like mountain races and like preferably in the early summer if possible,
Mm-hmm.
because that way you can do all your training and like in the spring,
Mm-hmm.
in the early or what I'm trying to say winter and spring, and that
Right.
way you're trained up for this race in the early summer and you don't have to train during the heat.
Sure. I've been there with you. I've not done the ultra yet, but the first marathon I did was a Halloween marathon. It was October 31st. So my big training, it was all during the summer, right? So even though it was really difficult for me, I just kind of felt that by the time I got to the race and it cooled down, my time was a lot faster than I thought it was going to be,
Mhm.
kind of thing. So I guess that kind of worked out. What was it like? How'd you feel? I mean, you went 30, but then you had 20 more miles to go on race day. How'd those last 20 miles feel?
Yeah, I mean, the thing with ultras is it's like I mean, for most people, the last half of the race is slower. And nobody runs the entire thing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, except unless you're just super elite, then you might run the whole thing. But even then, there's some sections you're going to be walking or hiking fast.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's when a lot of people say, "Oh, you ran 50 miles." It's like, well, no, I I went 50 miles.
Right, right.
It's like, maybe half of it was running, but
Sure.
the rest of it, it's like, hiking fast, and you definitely slow down in the second half. And I mean, as I've gotten more experience at this, I've gotten better at pacing myself and not going out so fast. And as we were talking about before, Grindstone 100 is a race I did, and I set out with an intention in that race of not going out fast and like
Mm-hmm.
hiking most everything,
Mm-hmm.
so that I wasn't dead tired in the second half.
Mm-hmm.
But I ended up making some mistakes in that race, like not eating enough food early on. When I felt great early on,
Mm-hmm.
but because I mean, I wasn't eating enough because I felt so great, but I paid the price
Right.
later on. Even though I paced myself in terms of speed early on. But it's one of those things you learn as an ultra marathon runner. The more of these races you do, I mean, another thing, nobody's going to finish every race they do. You're going to have good days and bad days.
Sure.
Um, so I would venture to say most people that set out to do, like, a half marathon or marathon, they'll finish the race. Nearly everyone they do, unless there's something catastrophic goes wrong. But
Mm-hmm.
ultra marathons, it's a different beast. It's like, you might finish half of the races you do.
Okay. All right. So, kind of interesting there. I think I don't know if you're familiar with the book Born to Run. Are you familiar with that one?
Yep, I've
Okay.
read it.
So,
Yep, I've read that one.
yeah, great book, and that was, I think that was the first time I began to realize there was something beyond a marathon. And I was like, "Are you kidding me?
Mhm.
There's this totally other world, right?" And Jen Sheldon is one of the characters in that book. True, I mean, true story, right? She's one of the people in that book, and I think I read her once. She said, if you can run a little bit and walk all night, you can finish 100.
Oh yeah,
So I
totally.
haven't done it. I haven't done it, but I've heard from a few people, and they've kind of said it's hiking with intention a little bit if you can get through the night.
Yeah, that's a very good way to put it. Is hiking with intention, and I think it's one of the mistakes a lot of people make when it comes to finishing. It's like they just don't hike fast enough, and that's one of the things
Mm,
that killed me in that grindstone attempt. I was just hiking so slow because I got so fatigued,
mm-hmm.
and yeah, because this I remember at one point after the race, going on a walk with my wife, and looking at I had my GPS watch on, looking at my watch, like, if I walked this pace the entire race, I would have finished. And she just looked at
Huh.
me, how did you not finish? It's
Huh.
like, I mean, it just goes to show you, if you don't fuel yourself properly early in the race, you can really destroy yourself and like not finish.
Sure. So, I mean, you've got a little experience, right? I mean, I've done a couple marathons. I've signed up for a 50, but I think you have 15 ultra finishes. Is that correct? Somewhere
Mhm.
around there?
Yep, I think that's about right. I think you looked it up, so I've never counted them myself, but it
Yeah,
sounds about
yeah.
right.
Yeah, so your completion rate was a little bit better. I think you said maybe 50%. I don't think you had a whole lot of DNFs on there,
Well,
but
it's more than 50% overall, but I would say, like, lately, because I've been pressing myself harder
hmm
and just doing more longer distances recently, and
hmm
more of those have resulted into not finishing for various reasons.
gotcha. So for those of people who are, I think a lot of people know about marathons. So I'm just going to kind of preface a little bit. I mean, we're sitting here talking about ultra marathons, and basically an ultra marathon it would be any distance beyond a marathon. Is that what you would agree with?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, yeah, I think so. 50K is kind of like the standard starting point, which I think is 31 miles. So
Okay.
that's kind of when you start entering the ultra territory. And there's not many races between marathon and 31 miles anyway. You
Right.
might occasionally have somebody who's got a long marathon course that ends up being 27 miles. And, people will tend to call that an ultra marathon too, though.
Sure. So, I mean, 15 ultra finishes is super impressive for my book. I'm going to try and get my first one in February, but it does take a toll on the body, right? I mean, um, I mean, I think it's something super cool to do. I'm so interested in the mental aspect of it, but That's kind of from what how I follow your story. That's kind of how it led you into your new business venture, right? With Hemp
Yeah.
Therapeutics. I mean, tell me a little bit about that. I mean, you experienced some injuries, I guess, along the way,
Yep.
and needed some help.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly it. So I had, training for a Bandera 100K. I ended up getting this like all these plantar fasciitis issues and Achilles tendonitis issues, and did a bunch of physical therapy for that. And all the plantar fasciitis issues all faded away, but then this like weird Achilles thing just like has stuck with me, and it's still with me today. And it's such a weird injury though, because there's no like visible swelling or like weird like growths on my bone or anything like that. And so it's really hard. I don't even know for sure if it's Achilles tendonitis, honestly,
Huh.
but um and I posted about it on Facebook, and somebody was like, well, hey, have you tried CBD oil? It's like, okay, I know what CBD oil is, because we were
Hmm.
even considering launching it as a product with Bearded Brothers at the time. And so it's like,
Hmm.
okay, I really need to look more into this now. And so I tried my first bottle of CBD oil, and like, I didn't notice anything with the Achilles at first, but I was sleeping better. And like, and I
Hmm.
never really struggled with sleep anyway, but I was falling asleep even faster. And, I would typically wake up a couple times during the night, but fall back
Hmm.
asleep. But I was just sleeping through the night. Like, I mean,
Hmm.
sleeping like a rock. And so that was the first thing I noticed. And when I would do my morning meditations, I would notice like the tension in my back was lessened. And I have this like chronic bursitis from a car accident. And so
Hmm.
I was like, well, that's not as tight as it normally is. Then
Hmm.
eventually I started noticing like, I'd wake up in the morning and that Achilles pain wasn't as strong, it wasn't as stiff.
Hmm.
And after I would do my long runs, I wouldn't be limping like, from the car to the, house as much as I used to. It's like, so there was this less inflammation and less swelling after these
Hmm.
long runs as a result. And
Hmm.
so even though the CBD wasn't healing the injury, I was seeing a lot of benefits from it. It's like, okay, I think there's really something to the CBD thing. And so at that time, it's like we were still considering launching it as a product with Bearded Brothers, but during that time, it's like we could never figure out how to make it work financially, just with how some other growth things were happening in the business with like launching in Walmart and airports. And so we could never support the growth. And around that same
Hmm.
time, we had an acquisition offer come our way. And it's like, well, hey, this is kind of our ticket out, because we were kind of at the point with the business where we honestly,
With Bearded Brothers, correct?
yes, with Bearded Brothers, yeah.
Yeah.
And so we didn't honestly know if we were going to be able to keep it going. Just, I mean, we were doing well. We had lots
Hmm.
of growth, but since we had never raised funding like a lot of other food entrepreneurs do, we had, I mean, we had signed on Walmart, like Winn-Dixie, and all these airport locations on the East
Hmm.
Coast. And it's like,
Hmm.
what? How are we going to support this? It's like, and we were so scared out of our minds to take on more debt. And so
Hmm.
this random acquisition offer came out of the blue, and so we jumped on it. And it's like, and I mean, it wasn't the best offer in the world. It wasn't this picture perfect exit like you see in the news stories. And
Hmm.
honestly, a lot of people that sell their business, it's like it's not this fairy tale dream story that everyone makes it out to be. But we were able to remain partners in the business. We still have some equity, and so after that exit, it's like, well, this CBD thing, I think this is where it's at. I think I can help a lot of people.
Hmm.
Especially with my passion for ultra running and healthy lifestyle. That's a market I could really go after and see people benefit from CBD. And that's how we kind of got our initial start, is just going heavy after the trail runners. And I was a guest on the Trail Runner Nation podcast, and that's how I kind of got our initial start and our initial customer base. And we've been doing pretty well ever since. Things kind of slowed down a little bit with COVID, but the interesting thing about the CBD space is too, is we're kind of talking about before the call, is it's really hard industry to be in because you're not allowed to advertise on Facebook like everyone else
Sure.
is. So it's
Right.
hard to get your name out there. And so unless you were in this industry like 10 years ago when it
Hmm.
first started, it's
Hmm.
really hard to grow and become like a prominent brand.
Hmm.
But I think we're one of the fortunate ones. I think I would say out of the thousands of CBD brands out there on the market, we are definitely, I would venture to say we are probably the best, just because of the farm that we partner with is growing the hemp organically. Our finished product is certified USDA organic. And a lot of these bigger brands like Charlotte's Web and Green Roads, like I mean, they're sourcing their hemp from all over the place. It's like they may be sourcing their hemp from 10 different farms. So
Hmm.
you're not going to be able to get an organic certification when you can't trace your ingredients well like I can. And so
Hmm.
that's one of the things that makes Hemp Daddy so unique is we work with a certified USDA organic farm, and our finished product is certified organic, and very few other CBD brands can even say that. And so, which kind of makes it frustrating from a standpoint. It's like I know our product is better, but it's so hard to get it out there
Sure.
to the people that need to hear about it because of all these advertising restrictions.
Sure. So it kind of reminds me a little bit of Bearded Brothers and what your bar was all about, right? I mean, there
Mm-hmm.
you said at the time you got into that space, the protein bar, health bar space, there was tons of competition and so many of the bars out there probably, not much better than a candy bar. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Yep.
So I mean,
Yeah,
what
and
what
like
did you learn with Bearded Brothers that you kind of brought into this new venture with Hemp Daddy? That what was one of the lessons that's
mhm.
helped you in this new venture?
Yeah, for one, just being able to launch it so quickly, having started a business before,
Hmm.
I kind of knew everything I had to get in place, all like the licenses and taxes and getting a website started and all that stuff, and
Hmm.
and it helped too that I had some funding just from the sale of my business,
Hmm.
where I could go out and hire somebody to get my website up and all that stuff.
Hmm.
Originally I thought, oh, I had web design skills, like, oh, I'm just going to design my website. And then at the end of the day, I was like, you know what? Like, I got a little bit of money, I can spend my time elsewhere.
Right.
But another thing too, I would say, is this niching down into an audience. And so just like
Hmm.
really going after that trail runner community. With Bearded Brothers, it was like the outdoor community, the trail runners, the hikers, the
Hmm.
backpackers. That's
Right.
who we were going after. And like you have to speak to an audience, um, because otherwise it's really difficult to reach anybody. Because if you're speaking to everybody, you're speaking to nobody.
Sure.
And I think that's a major mistake a lot of these CBD brands out there make right now, is they try to be the cure all for everybody. Like,
Hmm.
even though my CBD product is no different in the sense of what it does than anyone
Right.
else, I'm still seeking to speak to one audience and one pain point, because you can't have this message that just goes out to everybody, or it's just going to be ineffective.
Sure. So are you still targeting that ultra community, the ultra running community? Is
Yeah,
that your target
definitely.
audience?
Yep, that's still my primary target audience, and like COVID has like changed things. It's caused me to rethink a lot of just my marketing strategies behind the brand.
Hmm.
So I don't know if you ever seen like quizzes, like these online quizzes that people take. I mean,
Sure.
a lot of the times they're stupid quizzes, like, what Disney character are you and things like that. But
Right.
they're very engaging and very interactive. And so I'm currently working on something like that, but it's going to be for ultra runners, and it's going to be, what is your health recovery score? So it's going to walk you through all these different answers and give you a score on how well you're recovering based on what you answer. And then I'm going to be able to go in and kind of educate people about, how they can recover better, then talk about the benefits of CBD and how, it's anti-inflammatory. It can help you recover faster. It can help you sleep better, which also kind of ties into the whole recovery aspect. A lot of my customer base, I recently did a survey. They were talking about too, how they struggle with being motivated. And so it's
Hmm.
like, I can speak to like the mood boosting effects of CBD and how it
Huh.
helps clear your mind and be less stressed. And so you're going to be more motivated when your mind is more clear.
Hmm.
So there's just all sorts of benefits I can speak to, um, by walking people through, like, this quiz and giving them actual, even if they don't buy products from me, I'm going to be able to, still give them useful information to help them
Sure.
recover faster as an athlete.
Got you. So now your background, I mean, I know you've done a lot of business over the last 10 years. Do you have a marketing background? Is that correct? Is it
Yeah,
business
yeah,
or
pretty much. Yeah, I
got
was a business major at University of North Texas, so majored in BBA in marketing from University of North Texas.
gotcha.
So I did. I mean, I would say I was more a graphic designer than anything, years leading up to Bearded Brothers, but I still kind of had just a lot of the savvy and know-how. Just never really got to fully implement the things I knew and was capable
Hmm.
of until I started Bearded Brothers, and all of that marketing knowledge I had was really coming to play more than, because prior to that I was just in your typical 9 to 5 working for the man, and
Hmm.
where you're some, depending on where, I mean, there's people who have great jobs where their input is valid or is valued, but where I was at, my input was never valued. So it was just going into becoming an entrepreneur on my own was really good for me, because I was able to actually, put the things to work that I learned in school and knew that I was capable of.
Sure. And I'm sure that's coming in handy because, like you mentioned earlier, I mean, as far as CBD goes, there's so many restrictions. I know Facebook, we can talk about CBD on lives or on personal pages or whatever, but you can't run ads with CBD, right? I don't
Yep.
believe.
Yep, that's true. It's like the only possible way you could do it is by running an ad for a topical product. But even then, I've attempted it myself, and my ads get rejected. But yet I see a lot of these bigger guys running ads. But I think in a lot of those cases, if you see a CBD ad, like they've spent a lot of money and done a lot of legwork to get their ad up and running, and it's usually like retooling their website in such a way where like their bots aren't going to read the word CBD and things like that. So like, and that's one of the frustrating things about this too, is that like there's brands like mine that are like a premium brand that struggle to get the message out there, but there's these other crappy brands out there who just happen to have a lot of money somehow, and they're getting the word out there about their product through Facebook ads, even though it's a crappy product. And so it's frustrating.
Sure.
And a lot of people just don't know. It's just they see. I mean, when they're researching CBD, a lot of time it's like, oh, I've heard about CBD. Oh, here's an ad. Let me try this. But at the same time, I have no idea how good the results are. They may be getting really crappy results running those ads.
Sure.
Because the one downside of running an ad is you can't say CBD, so you kind of already have to know what CBD is when you see that ad. In order for it to even for you to even click on it, because a lot of the times it's the picture of the product and it doesn't even say CBD. So
Right.
that's why I'm a little more optimistic about the route I'm going with, trying to help people with a particular pain point and also providing them with a solution as well, because I
Sure.
can speak to that pain point and get my Facebook ads running without any fear of getting shut down, because I'm talking about CBD on the back end after they've gotten into my email list and things like that.
Gotcha, of course. So do you see, I mean, so there are obviously quite a few benefits of CBD, and you've already named some of them, reduced inflammation and better sleep and reduced stress and things like that. What is the number one pain point you're finding your customers are using CBD for?
So that's interesting. So I'm like, I've done some surveys recently with them, and a lot of them, while I would say half of them
Hmm.
are using it for like recovery and inflammation, I would say the other half, it's just something totally different. It might be stress, might be anxiety. I have customers that use it for like arthritis in their hands. I have one customer who's actually a family friend. They're using it for like seizures. Like his wife has seizures like all the time, and
Mm-hmm.
and she's on all sorts of medications, and even on her medications, she would still have like 4 seizures a month. And she
Hmm.
started taking our CBD, and she's down to like, I mean, one every 6 months. It's crazy just
Huh.
how life changing like CBD can be for some people.
Huh.
And so, I mean, to my knowledge, they're my only customer using it for seizures. I might have some that just have never said anything.
Hmm.
But there's people using it for depression, just PTSD, as well as another big one. A lot of veterans are turning to it for getting a lot of relief for PTSD and things like that.
Hmm.
So there's just, I mean, there's so many things. Um, and one thing I would say too, and everyone's different in regards to how they react to CBD. So
Hmm.
like, my neighbor in those in my office next to me, she struggled with depression, and she started taking my CBD, and she was getting relief with like 20 milligrams a day, which is a pretty low dose.
Hmm.
I would venture to say most people would need like a higher dose to get relief from depression, like 60
Hmm.
to 90 a day. And
Huh.
so it's interesting because we all have this, endocannabinoid system in our bodies. It's a regulatory system that produces cannabinoids naturally. But when you
Hmm.
introduce CBD into the system, it's kind of amping up those cannabinoids. And it's a sort of like an adaptogen. It knows where the body has stress and needs, and it kind of
Hmm.
just goes to work. And that's how it works on so many different things. It just kind of has this regulatory system that we have built in, and it just kind of knows where to go to work and know where your body needs things. And so a lot of people will come to CBD kind of like me, like for relief with my Achilles issues, and I
Mm-hmm.
started sleeping better and noticing less stress. Oh yeah, and during the sale of my business, that was like one of the most stressful things I've ever done. Had it not been for CBD, I probably would not have slept.
Huh.
And it really helped with the stress during that time too. And a lot of people will come to CBD for one thing and also get relief in other areas as well.
So it's got a lot of positive side effects, things that you
Yeah.
weren't looking for, but it shows up. So you were kind of using it for, I mean, some running injuries is kind of how you got into it, and then you found that it was also very useful for both stress relief
Hmm.
and to help you sleep a lot better, even though that wasn't really what you're looking for. A friend of mine just kind of jumped on. She's watching with us, and she also she said pet products. Have you had any success
Yes.
with using CBD with pets?
Yes. And so here's a quick thing about pet products. You can buy our products, even though they're not marked for pets. They are
Mm-hmm.
perfectly safe for pets. Any pet product you see out there, it's just a label. That's all it is. It's the same stuff you're giving humans, usually just bottled in a lower dose. So you could buy, any one of our doses and just dose an animal with a lower dose. So we've personally used it on. So when we used to travel full time in our RV, and we had
Mm-hmm.
this cat, and our cat would just travel with us. We would take a little bit of the transdermal cream, rub it on the inside of the cat's ear,
Mm-hmm.
and it would just be totally chill and relaxed in the car, not in a crate, and traveled totally fine. So
Huh.
I've had a few customers who have got our CBD whose dog was kind of at the end of their life, just really
Mm-hmm.
struggling.
Sure.
And like our neighbors here, they gave it to theirs. Unfortunately, their animal passed last week, but when they gave their dog CBD, the dog just like it was like a new animal again. Like
Huh.
she was like jumping up on the furniture when she
Huh.
hadn't been doing that before. And so you see a lot of these animals. I mean, even if you're giving it to them like when they're really struggling at the end of their day, like it's helping them have a better quality life
Mm-hmm.
in the last days. And so that's been most. And I have another customer who uses it for their dog. I mean, their dog's healthy. I think it might have arthritis or something now that I think about it, but like they give it to their dog regularly as well. And I hear a lot of really good testimonies from the animal side.
Huh.
It almost seems like the animals respond even better than humans. So
Hmm.
I've yet to hear if anybody, so I hear a lot of stories of people taking it and not getting the results they're looking for, but I've yet to hear anybody giving it to their animal and not seeing results.
Huh. Super interesting.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, this is purely anecdotal too. It's like,
Of
this is
course,
just
yeah.
what I've heard from my own customers and
Sure.
other people I've talked to.
Right. So it's the same stuff, right? It's and I mean,
Mhm.
are you talking about you're talking about oil? You're talking about a cream? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, CBD oil. So there's most people usually take it through a tincture oil. We have a water soluble product as well, so you can put it in water. So, with the tincture oils, you drop it under your tongue, you let it sit there for, 30 to 60 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
If you're dosing an animal, you can put it on their food or under their tongue if they want, or you can use a transdermal cream like we sell and just rub it on the skin on the inside of their ear. And since it's transdermal, it will absorb into their bloodstream.
Hmm.
Um, and that's one thing about like our transdermal cream. Most people have like a topical balm, which
Mm-hmm.
you'll still get CBD into your system in a localized, but since our stuff is transdermal, it's penetrating all the layers of the skin and getting into the blood barrier as well. And so
Mm-hmm.
we have people that have a lot of good results with the transdermal cream for localized pain issues. Like I mentioned, that customer with arthritis, she buys a few bottles at a time from me and
Mm-hmm.
just puts it on her hands for her arthritis and does wonders.
Gotcha. I love it. And so, I mean, this is your number one venture right now. You said Bearded Brothers, you've sold your part of the company
Mhm.
off, and you guys are kind of living that I guess for a while you were. I mean, I've read some of your stuff. You were living that RV lifestyle and
Hmm.
kind of out on the road. I mean,
Yep.
how's that been? I mean, tell us a little bit about what that was. How long did y'all spend doing that?
So we did the RV life for 40 years, and we would travel here every now and then. Even when we were in Bearded Brothers, we would go up to Colorado or New Mexico for the summer. Like when I did my Grindstone 100, we drove up to Virginia, and that's one of the made things that made that race really difficult. Is
Hmm.
I knew I had a bed that I could go to. My own bed was parked at the finish line, and so
Right.
like so yeah, we did a bit of traveling in the RV, but not near as much as we wanted to and envisioned happening. And we
Mm-hmm.
thought when we sold the business that we would hit the road and be traveling full time.
Mm-hmm.
But we had some shifts with Hemp Daddies with having to bring the production in house, and
Mm-hmm.
not the production, but the shipping aspect of it, because our manufacturer was handling our shipping to start, and they just weren't doing a good job. So I had to bring that on. So that kind of limited our ability to start traveling. And we just had a lot of kind of bad things happen to us on the road that kind of just left us. We called it travel PTSD. We're like, we're
Huh.
scared to be on the road right now. So,
Huh.
so we kind of decided to just wrap it up. And so at the time we were in San Marcos, Texas at the time. No, I take that back. We went up to Denton, Texas, back to
Mm-hmm.
where I get confused about where we were, where we've been and where we were. So we stayed up there for a while. Then we just kind of this after being up there for a couple of months, we thought we were going to regroup and hit the road.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but at the end of the day, we're just like, you know what? I don't think we want to do this. All our families in Texas, and with the changes in the business that were starting to happen, we decided to move back to Austin.
Mm-hmm.
And after we were parked in an RV park in Austin for a few months, and then we said, hey, let's get a house. I think we're ready for that. Our kids are getting older. We had three kids. We have three kids now. They're ages 3 to almost 8 now. And so we ended up finding this nice little, it's pretty much a tiny home here in the country
Mm-hmm.
on this piece of property. And I mean, our kind of a dream was to eventually get some land in Colorado. And so I'm like, well, this is kind of a happy medium. We're in Texas. We're in the hill country now. We're still close to our family. We're in a tiny home. I mean, it's 1,200, 1,300 square feet. So it's 2 bedroom, but it's like a mansion compared to the RV.
I'm
To most
sure.
people, yeah, most people would say, how can you live in a 2 bedroom house with three kids? Well, we used to live in an RV.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people have that dream, right? Going out on the road, and you said you had a little bit of, road PTSD, I guess.
Hmm.
You could treat with some CBD oil there, but
Yeah,
but
totally. Yeah.
a lot of people have that dream, and they don't ever go out and chase that dream. I love that
Mhm.
you guys did it. How long were you out on the road like that?
So we were on the road a few months after selling the business.
Okay.
We went up to Colorado, then we came back down for like a family wedding. Then we milled around in like San Marcos for a while. We were planning to stay in Texas mostly because we
Hmm.
knew the holidays were coming up.
Sure.
But kind of just everything kind of hit the fan a little earlier than we expected. So,
Right. Right.
um, like I can't remember exactly how we ended up in Denton, but something made us go up there. I mean, I'm from there originally, so that
Right.
could have been part of it. And there is like a cheap RV park up there too, is another
Sure.
aspect of it too. So,
But
but
you
yeah,
guys are kind of big believers in the minimalistic lifestyle, is that right?
oh yeah, totally. And
Kind of the
yeah, and that's
no waste, no low waste sort of lifestyle type thing.
yes, and like, and that's even ramped up even more since COVID. We got a compost pile going out here now. We got a garden going. We got chickens too, but we got these chickens before we started going more vegan. So now we're not sure what we're gonna do. Um, but we'll probably give them away. I mean, we let our kids eat them too, just because it's one of the few things our kids will actually eat. But yeah, we've ramped it up even more. We've like one of the things that frustrated us when we moved to this property, they didn't have recycling.
Hmm.
But we got a bunch of the neighbors to like, beg our landlord to put a recycle bin out here. So they finally did that.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I've been like, and we don't plan on moving into anything bigger anytime soon either. Like we're perfectly happy in our small house with like, it forces you to own less stuff when you're in like a small space like this. And so we
Sure.
really like it. I mean, we own more stuff now than we lived in the RV, but like we've
Right. Right.
expanded a little bit, but at the same time, like it does force you to just maintain a smaller footprint when you're in such a small
Hmm.
space.
I heard someone say once, do you own your things or do your things own you? Right.
Hmm. Yes, and that's so I feel like that's so true because like when we went to the RV lifestyle, it's like I mean we lived in a 1 bedroom apartment or 2 bedroom apartment at the time, and like
Hmm.
we did not realize how much crap we owned
Hmm.
until we like started selling everything. Like we just
Hmm.
Craigslisted the crap out of things, and like
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there was still like I took like a truck full of stuff to like Goodwill at the end of our purge, and I
Hmm.
still stored like at the time since we owned Bearded Brothers, I had like a pallet in the corner of our warehouse of just our crap that just
Mm-hmm.
sat there for like, 2 years after that, no,
Sure.
4 years. It sat there like the whole 4 years and we never
Right.
touched it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just goes to show you like how much stuff you own that you don't even need. And like, and,
I,
and honestly, none of that stuff, we never missed that stuff either. It
sure.
was never like, oh, we need that. Let's go get it out. That never
Mm-hmm.
happened.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, these last several months, 4, 5, 6 months, whatever it's been, that people have been in lockdown and,
Mhm.
been kind of being forced to live a different way. I think a lot of people have reevaluated how they're living, what they're doing, how
Mhm.
much TV they're watching and things like that. I mean, I know me personally, I quit watching TV a couple of years ago and I just couldn't be any happier. I mean,
Mhm.
I run more, I read more, I hang out with real people more and have real conversations more. So I know it's been kind of good for me, but I think a lot of people, a lot of people watching might find the lifestyle you're living pretty appealing. I mean,
Mhm.
I mean, obviously it's working out pretty well for you guys, huh?
Yeah, it really is. And like, and it's interesting when we first started this, like I was like the more adventurous in terms of like outdoors, running, rock climbing. Like
Mm-hmm.
my wife had this crazy idea of like living in an RV.
Mm-hmm.
And so many people said, "Oh, I could never do that. I could never live in such a small space. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't do that with kids." But like honestly, like kids is like one of the dumbest reasons, because kids are so adaptable. They do whatever you tell them. It's like,
Sure.
it's
Yeah.
like where it's like, hey, we're going to live in an RV. Like, cool. Okay, we're selling the RV, we're moving into a house. Cool. Like
Mm-hmm.
they roll with the punches, and they're so adaptable.
Mm-hmm.
And like, but taking that initial step was a little bit of a struggle for me. But at the end of the day, like just so glad we did it. It was so worth it. And it made, I mean, just not owning all this stuff so freeing. um
Yeah.
and honestly, at times there's times I get like little anxious feelings when I look around this house that we're in now. I'm like, we're acquiring too much stuff now. Um and and when we lived in, and this is something you can even implement if you're not an RV, like about every 6 months when we lived in the RV, we would have a purge. We would
Mm-hmm.
look at our stuff and say, okay, what do we not need anymore? And we
Mm-hmm.
would like get rid of it. Some of that came back to bite us in the rear. Like we got rid of like a really nice camping tent.
Mm-hmm.
I lost some camping pads in the process, but and now we're wanting to get back into camping, and we don't have that gear. So there's some downsides.
Sure.
Um, but like it's so, to me it's just so freeing, just like having so
Mm.
much less stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And when we were in the RV, like I mean financially too, it's like that was such financially freeing thing, because our cost of living was so much lower than
Sure.
living in a house or being in an apartment, because
Sure.
our rent was so much lower. And like, and during that time, like I mean we had so much stuff happen in terms of like medical bills and these random expenses, and we were able to
Mm-hmm.
just cash flow everything
Hmm.
because our expenses were so low. And so I
Nice.
mean it's really freeing from that standpoint too. And like I mean that's another reason we came out to the country. Like rent was just so dang high in Austin.
Yeah.
Like I mean coming out to the country is kind of more of what we love anyway. And I mean I was a little hesitant myself because I like my creature comforts, I like my coffee shops, I like my breweries.
Sure.
I like being able to ride my bike to, I had a co-working space in East Austin that I really enjoyed. And so there was some sacrifices coming out here, but at the end of the day, I've grown to just love this so much, and it's just so freeing. And especially during COVID right now, like
Yeah.
when I mean we're so much less worried about getting COVID where we're at because the population density is so much lower.
Of course. One word that you said several times, which is exactly kind of where I was wanting to get at with the lifestyles. You said the word that it's freeing, right? It's freedom, and
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of friends who are entrepreneurs. I'm also, I do a lot of different things in my life. I host this show, I teach history, I sell houses. I've got a lot of
Yeah.
entrepreneurial friends, um, and a lot of them, they just nothing wrong with this, but a lot of their dream, they're chasing money, right? They want money, they
Mm-hmm.
want to get rich, and not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm not preaching, people should do whatever it is they want to do, but I like to ask myself why people do the things that they do. And I think at the end of the day, if I'm going to answer or put my 2 cents into why people are trying to get money, I think it's that freedom, right? I
Mm-hmm.
don't think people want to work a ton and have money but can't ever use it or enjoy it, right? I think it comes down to that freedom. And so at the end of the day, I think, you're an entrepreneur. I guess you're able to run your business through a phone, laptop. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, yeah, aside from the fact that we did have to bring our shipping in house, so like,
Mm-hmm.
I do have to ship out my own products, which is kind of the only limiting factor right now.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm just waiting for just to hit this inflection point with the business to be able to hire somebody for that. But then that's going to free me up so much more. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah,
I love that. So,
but
I mean,
but but yeah, I think there's more of a question tied in there. But yeah, being as an entrepreneur, it's like I've never been this entrepreneur who's just earned tons of money. It's
mm-hmm.
more the freedom that has been the attraction for me. And there's been so many times where I've and just looked at my wife and been like, we've like, maybe I should go get a real job. Then we can actually start investing some for our future. Then at the end of the day, though, we're like, but I would not be able to have breakfast with the family every morning. I wouldn't be able to be at dinner every meal. Like I don't miss a single breakfast or dinner with my family. There are
Mm-hmm.
occasions I might go out for a meeting or something like that, but for the most part, I'm with my family every day for like breakfast and dinner. And we get to go, we're about to leave for New Mexico for a vacation. So we get to take vacations together. And like even though we may not be as wealthy as some other people out there, like
Mm-hmm.
there's like the freedom aspect is worth so much more to me than like any dollar amount. It's like, I wouldn't go take like a $200,000 a year job or even $100,000 a year job. I would not take that if somebody offered it to me today, if they told me I was going to have to be in the office every day from 9 to 5. I
Mm-hmm.
would not do it. Like this, it's so much more freeing to earn less money, but have all the freedom to make your own choices and be your own boss and all the things that come with that.
I love that, man. I think more and more in the world that we're in right now, a lot of people, have learned to work from home and do different things in the
Mm-hmm.
current COVID
Mm-hmm.
climate, right? And I
Yeah.
think I think a lot of people are coming back more in line with kind of putting family first and what really
Mm-hmm.
matters, right? And
Yeah.
is it important to make X amount of dollars, or is it more important to make enough and have more time doing, with your friends and family and your loved ones
Mm-hmm.
and the things that you care about doing? And um, I think a lot of people are changing their views on that, and I'm kind of happy to see that, really.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I love that you guys are really doing that, and kind of, I mean, to me, you're living the dream, if you ask me. We only really get one at bat, right? We only get one go at this thing in life. We might as well enjoy what we're doing every day.
Yeah, totally. And I would totally agree. It's like, it's like the life I'm living is kind of the life I always wanted. When I worked my traditional 9 to 5s, I always wanted to be self-employed. I always wanted to work for myself. But
Hmm.
it was just the fear of taking the initial leap that like kept me from it. And one of the things honestly was like a health issue I had at the time. And honestly, it took taking a leap of faith and just trusting that everything was going to be provided for, and it has. And it's like, and that health issue, it was like these muscle spasms that I used to have. And
Hmm.
like I don't know if it was the diet change or the reduction in stress or what it was,
Hmm.
but like after I left my that full-time job, I never needed that medication anymore, and I've not
Huh.
taken it since.
Huh. How
Yeah.
how long ago was that? When's the last time you had a standard 9 to 5?
That I guess it's about 10 years, 11
About 10
years.
years, 10, 11
10,
years
11
ago.
years, yeah. It was, yeah, 2011 or 10. I always get a blank, 10 or 11. Around that
Hmm.
time frame when we started Bearded Brothers is pretty much when. So yeah, I think it was summer of 2010. I moved to Austin, and by January of 2011 is when Bearded Brothers had got kicked off. So, um, yeah.
So you said, I mean, you've already kind of mentioned it, it was a level of faith, right? Like you just had to
Hmm.
had to jump. I mean, you had a 9 to 5, you had a steady income, and a
Hmm.
lot of people are in that boat. Maybe, I mean, from the numbers I've seen, something like 70% of Americans are not super happy with what they're doing. They don't really like their
Hmm.
job. Um, a lot of people would love to make that jump. I mean, what kind of you've been quite successful. At least you've lived on your entrepreneurial endeavors for the last decade or so. What
Hmm.
advice would you give to somebody who's watching tonight, and they're like saying, "Hey, I don't know if I want to just keep working for the man for the rest of my life, what advice would you give them? How, you've done it.
Yeah.
How would you
Yeah.
advise somebody to get started?
Man, I would say the first thing I would do is like figure out like what you're passionate about, and then some sort of angle to like go after it and monetize it. And I mean, there's so much free information out there on like, YouTube and just like blogs and things like that. There's I wish I could remember his last name. He's got a book called 12 Months to a Million that I recently read. His name's Ryan something. I mean, that's a great starting point for anyone
Hmm.
that's looking to start a business, because he walks you through like, I mean, how to start a business from nothing to $1 million in revenue. I mean, granted, that's a formula that doesn't always pan out perfectly in the real world,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
the whole premise is like, find something you're passionate about, write about it on a blog, whether it's, then go after that, then figure out a product that you can provide, whether it be like a service or a physical product to meet the needs of that person, and
Hmm.
just go after it. And this can be started as a side hustle to start.
Sure.
Just in extra hours. I mean, you might have to stay up an extra hour or two every night to work on a project like that, but you
Hmm.
can transition out and find something you're passionate about. But I mean, if
Hmm.
you're somebody who might have some money stashed aside, like, I mean, I would encourage you to just take the leap and
Hmm.
just make it work. I mean, because when we started Bearded Brothers, it's like I didn't pay myself for 2 years, and
Wow.
it got down to the point where like my wife got pregnant with our first child, and I'm like,
Hmm.
oh crap! I'm like, we're still not paying for ourselves, and we'd
Right.
always said once we get pregnant, she's gonna leave her job. And she was like, all right, I'm putting in my notice. It's like,
Hmm.
but I'm not paying myself yet. And she's like, well, God's gonna provide. I was like,
Hmm.
okay. So we took this leap of faith and said, and it just turned around just in time. The business just hit an inflection point where it started generating enough revenue to pay me. And like and if we never took that leap of faith, it never would have happened.
Hmm. I love that. So you've mentioned faith a couple of times. I
Mhm.
take it you're a man of faith.
Yep, indeed. Hmm.
I love that. You also mentioned meditation, right? You do a little
Hmm.
bit of meditation on top of that.
Yep.
It's a topic I've become super fascinated with. I don't know if you've heard of Joe Dispenza, but he wrote a book called Breaking the Habit of
Hmm.
Becoming of Being Yourself, and then he wrote another book called Becoming Supernatural, and he talks a lot about meditation. And
Hmm.
I think sometimes in church, some people shy away from meditation. So I always find I'm fascinated with the topic of people who are both believers and they also practice meditation. Is that something that
Hmm.
you kind of regularly do in your life, is meditation?
It is, and it's been a pretty big part of my morning routine for
Hmm.
several years now. It's not something I do every morning, but
Hmm.
it's like it's at least a few days a week. It's something I incorporate in there, and I really found it to be helpful in the sense of like helping me to focus on like whatever task I'm doing, because we live in a world that's like so distracting with all these dings and our emails or Facebook. There's all these distractions, and meditation forces you to sit still and be present in a moment. And for me, it's never been about reaching some higher state of being or anything like that. It's been more about
Hmm.
like breathing and being present and
Hmm.
experience, and just being present in that experience and being okay with being bored for 10 minutes. Um,
Right.
and more recently, I've incorporated more prayer into the meditation. So, I mean, even scripture says, to meditate on
Sure.
scripture, and pray. And like, but it's something the church doesn't talk about much.
Right.
And nobody ever taught me how to have meditation as part of my spiritual life, growing up in church. It's something I had to figure out on my own. And so that's been a big part of, just my morning routine for quite a while. And more recently too, I've introduced, I don't know if you've heard of Wim Hof,
Of
but
course.
I've
Yeah. Yeah.
introduced
For
kind of
sure.
like some just Wim Hof breathing into my morning, and
Hmm.
just really helps, just that breathing pattern just helps like just bring the stress levels down, and just helps you to just focus, and just helps with mindset, and just helps you to be more just a little more peaceful in your mind, and just helps. This is a good start to the day. It helps kickstart the morning and start the day.
Yeah, I love that. So, I mean, you were talking about 10 years ago, you were kind of working the 9 to 5, working for the man. You weren't running, you were just kind of living that American unhealthy lifestyle, and you've kind of turned it all around, and really
Hmm.
everything, the last decade or so, your life has been pretty focused on physical and mental, spiritual health, and I love what I was a big fan of your Bearded Brothers bars products going back. I probably first had them in 2013 or something like that.
Hmm.
So I was a big fan, and I love everything you're doing in your life, right? And it's kind of brought you back to where you are with Hemp Daddy, products now. And I
Hmm.
love the fact that you're putting out a good product that has so many different benefits. I'd like to kind of just hit on that a little bit more before we get off here. I mean,
Hmm.
we've been talking a little bit about CBD oil and some benefits. I mean, you want to just give us a quick recap for people who, the different ailments that
Yeah.
people could use CBD for.
Yeah. So I'll just give a kind of high level view of kind of what CBD is and some things it can help us with. So, CBD is produced from the hemp plant, which is
Mm-hmm.
kind of it's sort of the cousin of the cannabis plant. It's the
Mm-hmm.
same thing, honestly, but it's bred with a high level of CBD and low levels of THC. So there's no intoxicating effects. Um,
Okay.
so a lot of people say it's not psychoactive, but that's not true because it does affect your mind. So it has calming effects on the mind. It can help with things like we mentioned PTSD and depression. So
Mm-hmm.
it is psychoactive in that sense, but it's not going to get you high. It's like I don't think you could drink an entire bottle of CBD and get high,
Mm-hmm.
even though it does have that trace amounts of THC. And so
Sure.
so there's some people out there that could have a potential um, moral conflict with this. So, but
Mm-hmm.
I like to liken it to like the beverage kombucha. Kombucha is like a
Mm-hmm.
fermented health beverage that
Sure.
it's slightly alcoholic. It's got a
Mm-hmm.
small amount of alcohol in it, but you're never going to get drunk drinking a kombucha. And
Right.
so it's a healthy beverage. And the same as with CBD, it's a plant. It's healthy. It's good for you. It has all these medicinal and therapeutic benefits. And so it's like so there's so many good things. Um, and so there's almost I'd venture to say there's almost nothing it can't help with. It's a little dangerous to say that because there's lots of things that won't help with, and there's some people that just don't react well to it, so they might not.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's kind of like with a medication. It's like if you go to a doctor for blood pressure or whatever, they're going to give you medication, but that one might not work, so they might give you something different.
Mm-hmm.
So CBD's similar in the sense that like not everyone is going to have these amazing positive results that you hear about. So it's just something you have to try out.
Sure.
And one thing I always encourage people of like, so, whether it's taking it for depression or inflammation or anxiety, like you have to experiment with your dose and be willing to be patient. Because what dose works for one person might not work for the next person. So I always encourage people to start out with a low dose, like about 5 milligrams a day, and
Mm-hmm.
take that for a few days and see how you feel. If you're not seeing results, bump it up another 5 to 10 milligrams and continue to do that until you get results. And you might even try experimenting with like a dose in the morning, a dose in the evening. Um, and so since there's not a ton of research behind this yet, and there's no doctors prescribing it, you just kind of have to
Mm-hmm.
experiment on your own and figure out what works best for you. And I always encourage people to be patient with it too. Give it like at least 60 days, because it can take at least 30 days to build up into your system
Mm.
in order to kind of like achieve maximum results. So I think a lot of people, CBD gets a bad rap from some people, but a lot of the times, I think it's two main reasons. Either they had an inferior product that just wasn't good, or they didn't give it enough time and kind of tweak their dosing enough to where they got the results they were looking for. And one of the nice things about Hemp Daddies is since we're such a small brand, I can help you like figure out a dose that works for you. Unlike a lot of these other brands who have lawyers telling them what they can and can't do. Like if
Right.
somebody reaches out to them asking for, oh, how much should I take? Their lawyer's going to tell them you can't tell them anything. As
Mm-hmm.
me, I'm so small, like my risk is very minimal
Right.
in terms of like hurting somebody. And CBD's on it, like there's little to no negative side effects to CBD, so I'm not concerned about like somebody having a negative experience. But plus, if they're reaching out to me on a personal level asking for help, I mean, the chances of them suing me are slim to none. So
Sure.
like I'm like, at least at the stage of the game I'm in right now with my business, I can be very generous with the knowledge I lend to people. And so like if you email me like, Caleb at hempdaddies.com, I will respond to your email and give you some suggestions for dosing if you're having any issues. So that's kind of my spill.
I love it, man. I know your whole life, your family, everything y'all been doing for 10 years is totally dedicated to an all natural, healthy lifestyle. So,
Hmm.
I know your product out there is also committed to being the best CBD product you possibly, can put out on the market. And I love that, what you shared, that personal connection that if people, purchase your product, use your product, that they do have access to you, answer questions, or to reach out if they need help with dosing or things like that.
Hmm.
So if someone was interested and they're saying, hey, I need to find out more, you do have a website, right? You want to tell us
Yep.
how people can
Yep.
find that your website? And I'll drop
Yep.
the
So
link, but if you
just,
can tell us.
yep, it's just hempdaddies.com, hemp, DADDYS.com. Don't forget the S. I couldn't get the domain Hemp Daddy. And somebody else snagged that, unfortunately. That's another thing. Yeah, we won't go into that. But so yeah, hempdaddies.com. Or if you search for us on YouTube as well, you can find a lot of educational videos I've made in the past. Just if you want to dive into those, or you can go to the blog on our website as well. Lots of articles and information there to educate you about CBD. And like I said too, you can shoot me an email, Caleb, CALEB at hempdaddies.com.
We got the link. Sydney just jumped on. Sydney, thanks for dropping the link. Sydney Ray, friend of mine from around New Orleans, Louisiana. She just
Okay.
dropped the link. So anybody interested in knowing more about Caleb's product, it's a great all natural CBD product. Go check it out. He's got a lot of information. You've got a personal connection here. Like you said, you can reach out to him personally if you have kind of questions about it or whatnot. Um, so, Caleb, I appreciate you hanging out with me tonight, man, and it's been a
Yeah.
lot of fun. I really enjoy talking some ultra marathoning with you, and I guess we should stay in touch. I'm jumping on this ultra journey this year, and we'll see how it goes, man. I look forward
Yeah,
to
definitely.
that.
Yeah, definitely. I'll have to give you a little some tips and pointers and little coaching along the way.
I love it. I love it, man. I love what you guys are doing. I love the family that y'all have committed to, living that kind of minimal, family centered life where it's kind of low tech and just back to nature, just sort of living the dream out there, man. I love what y'all are doing.
Yeah, totally.
I've loved your Bearded Brothers product for a really long time, and I'm really happy to get to talk about your Hemp Daddy product tonight as well. So appreciate you hanging out with me tonight, man. And let's stay in touch and keep up with each other's journey.
All right, yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it. It was fun.
All right, Caleb. Yeah, take care, man. Good night, everybody.
All right, good night.